Is it too late to buy Bitcoin? Hello and welcome back. A question I am asked almost on the daily at this point where we find ourselves in history right now is, have I missed the boat? Is it too late to get into crypto? Is it too late to get into Bitcoin? And today I want to address exactly that in as simple terms as possible. The simple answer to that, if you want to skip ahead, is no, absolutely not. It's almost cliche at this point to say it, but the best time to buy Bitcoin was several years ago. The second best time is right now. The first thing I want to do to kind of break that down a little bit more for you is explaining where I see Bitcoin in my portfolio. I am a Bitcoin maxi. If you're new to this, that means I tend to hold the majority of my crypto portfolio in Bitcoin. Now, the reasons for that are many, but let me just give you the simple hot take on that. Essentially, Bitcoin was the first crypto. That is why Bitcoin is the largest crypto. Bitcoin is the most secure crypto, at least in terms of the fact that it has the longest track record of being secure. And clearly it is, at the moment, the natural choice for the institutions, right? It was the first ETF. It's the first crypto that serious smart money, serious big money wants to get into and wants to hold for a long time. And I believe that as long as global economies keep debasing their fiat currencies, that will be the place to keep safe money for the future, at least until further notice. Now, the way that I accumulate Bitcoin is pretty simple, okay? It's dollar cost averaging. That means I want to buy more and more Bitcoin over time. And essentially, when we're dollar cost averaging, you're taking the idea that it's simply too risky to try and time big market movements to fill up your portfolio all in one go. And it's better to just accumulate Bitcoin for its dollar cost average over time, or for its fiat cost average over time. So say you had a certain amount of money to put into the markets, a certain amount of money that you want to allocate to crypto. You'd want to segment those funds and slowly get them into the market over time. Now, history has taught us that the crypto market is cyclical. It goes through periods of rising and periods of downturn. And generally speaking, it is better to be dollar cost averaging into a downturn because over time, you're getting lower and lower prices, trusting that eventually the market will rise. And that makes an important distinction between buying Bitcoin and trading Bitcoin. Once again, absolutely not too late. If you're not in yet, it's not a bad time to start getting involved. But I do believe an event is coming, and that presents opportunities both for accumulating Bitcoin and for trading Bitcoin as well. And that is what I want to get into right now. So we are at the time of recording at a price of $91,000. We are within spitting distance of a new all-time high. Here on the Coinbase chart, that would be a price of $93,500. And as I've said already, this isn't a terrible time to get into the market if your goal is long-term. If you're looking at this as an investment over the next 5 to 10 years, right? Through multiple cycles even. Quite clearly, you could see you wouldn't be the only one getting in. Over the last few days, save for the 14th, we've seen multiple days over $1 billion of net inflows into the spot Bitcoin ETFs. But what I will say is, sure, you could buy right now. But as I've said, I think you could do one better. And this also presents an opportunity that I'm planning on capitalizing on, not just in my long-term spot holdings, but also in the leverage portfolio where I want to leverage up and speculate on short-term price movements. So let me take you over to the Google search trends to kind of put some more color on this, right? As you can see, I am looking at the search term Bitcoin worldwide over the last 5 years. And as you can see, over the last few months, this has been absolutely dead, but quite clearly it has massively spiked up. Since here on the chart, we're looking at a date range of between the 13th to the 19th of October. That's when this started really ticking up. And as you can see, Google foresees the trend continuing. Now, what that means basically is a lot of people are getting interested in Bitcoin again. A lot of new money is getting interested in Bitcoin again. And what does retail tend to do? They tend to buy tops and they tend to sell their coins at a later date to smarter investors. Hopefully you've seen my video on the buy the top trade, right? We actually scaled into that trade over time. We bet on the Trump election win, and then we added to that position heavily as we started to break all-time highs because, as I explained at the time, right, when the all-time high was down at 70 something dollars, that was a very historic break of all-time highs. Now, you can't very often get away with a breakout trade, but in this case, I thought it was worth taking the risk, taking the bet on that. I don't see that happening again at this top. Now, that's not to say that we couldn't just rip up from here, okay? This isn't a terrible place. Bitcoin hasn't just been moving in one direction. We've been trending sideways. We've been range bound since the 12th of November, as we can see it. And what that means is more volume has been traded, right? There's been buys and sells in this time, and the market is starting to accept prices at these levels. There is definitely a scenario where we continue up from here. Big institutions aren't Googling Bitcoin, okay, because they know what Bitcoin is. They know they want to get into Bitcoin. Retail investors are Googling Bitcoin. And retail investors are inexperienced. Retail investors tend to buy on emotion and they tend to buy on FOMO. They also love buying on leverage. And that is kind of where I see this opportunity coming. So if we look over at the Bitcoin liquidation map here on CoinGlass, what we can see is down at the lows of the range that we've been in over the last few days, down at a price of $85,000. There is now a liquidation risk, a long liquidation risk of about $1 billion. Now that is not massive compared to what we've seen in the markets, particularly over the last few days, but it only takes one big round of liquidations to go through before a cascade effect can start, and that leads to another round of liquidations. If you don't know what a liquidation is, it is when an account has bought Bitcoin on leverage, they haven't set a stop loss, and they're then forced to close that position. They're forced to sell into the market involuntarily, okay, because they've not set a stop loss, they've not managed their risk correctly, and the exchange that they're trading on essentially forces them into that sell position because they don't have the capital in that fund to put up with a price movement beyond the liquidation level. What happens when people start selling all at once, all in a hurry, all in surprise? Supply gets dumped on the market. Increased supply, steady demand leads to a decrease in prices. Now we can also measure this kind of emotional effect in the fear and greed index. And you can see that that has been tapping into extreme greed over the last few days. You can see yesterday we were at a score of 88 out of 100. Today we're at a score of 80 out of 100. And in the last week, we've been up at scores of 75, 73. Another way you can get a feel for this trend, this feel for new, excited, emotional money coming into the market is, funnily enough, in the question, is it too late to get into crypto? Is it too late to get into Bitcoin? And that is where I think the opportunity lies right now, both for accumulating more of this asset, right? Accumulating more spot Bitcoin to add to the bags that I plan on holding, at least in part to the end of this cycle. But it also presents a big opportunity to trade this because I can see a price dislocation coming. Now, what that would sort of look like from a charting perspective is a rapid move down to this level, breaking through this level, and then an overextended move to the downside as people start panicking. This doesn't necessarily need to be people being actually liquidated, at least not in full. It could also be the case that the market sees a movement down like this. Oh, Bitcoin was at 90K last week. Now it's only at 80K. This is a disaster. I'm going to cut my losses. I get out of this position before it becomes liquidated. And all of that is selling, ultimately. It all comes back down to supply and demand. And the reason I can see it coming is because I've seen this in past cycles, right? Particularly at new all-time high breaks. Everyone gets euphoric. Everyone starts piling in. And then as soon as they don't get instant confirmation, instant gratification of that move, they start panicking again. The whole market goes, oh, okay, we were too soon, we were too early. And then you get this massive price dump. And that is basically what we would call a price dislocation, i.e. a move of the price away from where its fair value really should be. And that is very, very exciting if you're prepared for it and if you're waiting for it, right? If you have the patience to wait to get into the market at a price that favors your thesis versus just jumping in with everybody else, acting on emotion, etc., etc. Now, where would I be targeting for a move like that? So if we draw a volume profile, basically starting from the Trump move, okay? I've drawn that in from the 5th of November, before the election, all the way to where we are right now. What you can see is a point of control, which is kind of in the middle of the range that we've been in over the last few days. The point of control is basically the price where the most volume has been exchanged on aggregate. But we can also see a volume peak down here at a price of around $76,000. And this is kind of the range that we were in immediately after that election pump. That is where I'm targeting right now for this move, at least until proven otherwise, because price tends to gravitate towards areas of higher volume. It tends to stick around in those areas. Sometimes it can bounce from those areas, but it tends to move very quickly through areas of low volume. And that low volume area is this really fast move that we had up from, call it $78,000 up to the high 80s, up until 90. So right now, calling it as I see it, that is the move that I'm looking for, okay? I'm looking to both accumulate spot and potentially get into a leverage position, and I have bids in the market on both of those fronts, waiting for something like this to happen. It doesn't necessarily have to happen right now. As I've said, we could get another round of mania, we could break the all-time high again, and we could get even more new money piling in on FOMO, but that only magnifies the effect of this happening in the future. So right now I'm bidding this range, and I've spread out my bids around that high volume node, we call that, at $76,600, some higher, some lower, because it's really, really hard to trade these moves in the moment. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for liquidations, a sudden panic sell-off, an overextension of price down into this volume area, and then a very rapid move back up from there. That gives us both slightly better pricing for long-term holdings, and it also gives us an opportunity in the short term, because once again, this is straight from the playbook of bull run mania, straight from the playbook of past cycles where we've seen all-time highs go absolutely crazy. A load of people jump in on leverage, a load of people jump in that don't know what they're doing. Those people get scared, panicked when the price starts coming down, and they start dumping. And that gives you an opportunity to get in at prices that you shouldn't be able to get into, because the price has dislocated from where its fair value is, right? From where the value should be, given that global economies keep debasing their fiat currencies, and given that it seems more and more institutions right now are just lining up to pack their bags full of Bitcoin. So in conclusion, no, you're not too late, but I think we can do one better. That's certainly what I'm looking for. As always, though, that is just my opinion, just what I'm looking at, absolutely not financial advice. Thank you so much for watching until the end. There is plenty more to come. Catch you in the next one. Cheers.